For 10 years, he was the winningest coach in college football.
You know, winning's not a sometime thing, winning's an all-time thing, and Doyt was a winner all the time.
His goal was perfection every time he took the field.
Doyt's idea was that if you didn't win, the problem was not that you weren't good enough, the problem was that he didn't work hard enough, that he didn't prepare you well enough, or you didn't work hard enough.
Defying convention, he created a winning attitude from his worst expectations.
Doyt, in fact, would tell us we were going to lose in a lot of cases.
Yet he was always bringing out the best in others.
He would take a poor group, he would make them average. He would take an average group and make them good, and he'd take a good group and make them great.
And when success opened bigger doors, Doyt Perry put his own team first.
So it wasn't a matter that so much that you played for him or coached for him. You were part of his family. He was part of your family.
His vision was to build a program that would last. He was not there for overnight success and see you later.
Memories of a coach, teacher, and friend. Next on Doyt Perry, A Coach for Life.
This program is made possible by Chuck and Betty Perry, Bill and Sandy Gunlock, David Perry, and the Charles E. Perry Society. Additional support has been provided by the following.
You're going to get a talk from Doyt now. Doyt's going to get us fired up, and Doyt would say, okay, fellas, I studied the pictures of this Miami team, and I think I got them pretty well figured out. And all the players, you're going to looking at him, eyes open, you know, 5 minutes before kickoff. What's he found? What's he found that's going to help us? And he'd go, this Miami team, he said, let me tell you what, they're good enough that they could blow us right off the field. They're that good. Or we're good enough that we could blow them right off the field, or this could be one hell of a game. Okay, let's go. And the players would be walking down the tunnel and think, they could blow us out, we could blow them out, it could be one, there's nothing else could happen. He had described every sequence that could possibly take place in that game.
In the fall of 1969, Ohio State University and the University of Michigan met to decide the Big Ten football championship and a trip to the Rose Bowl. The Buckeyes, coached by Woody Hayes, were said to be the greatest college team ever, while first-year coach Bo Schembechler led the underdog Wolverines. 50 miles south of Ann Arbor, in Bowling Green, Ohio, Doyt Perry had a personal interest in the game. A former coach himself, he had worked with both Woody and Bo. But more importantly, he was about to pick that weekend's football winners and losers for the local newspaper. It was the last week of a season-long contest, and Doyt had a chance to win it all. The outcome of this game seemed certain. Everyone in the contest was picking Ohio State to win, Doyt included.
Well, that night in the Sentinel, they had an interview with Bo Schembechler, and they talked about the mentor versus the student, Woody Hayes versus Bo Schembechler, and Bo mentioned that the mentor in his life was Doyt Perry. The man he learned most of his football from was Doyt Perry. The man that he emulated on a day-to-day basis was Doyt Perry, and that Woody was important, but Doyt Perry was the man that had taught him his football. So the next day I came into the office, and I walked to my office, and I had a knock on my door, and here comes Doyt. He says, you know, Jack, I think this Bo Schembechler coached Michigan team has a chance to upset that Ohio State team, and I think that's the way I'm going to go.
To everyone's amazement, Ohio State lost. To no one's surprise, Doyt had won again. Doyt Perry was a winner all his life, and few things came easier to Doyt than competition. As a football coach, his intention was to win constantly, and if necessary, lose gracefully.
He was grounded in fundamentals. He wanted to be able to out-block and out-tackle the opponent. And he wanted to perfect every play and every defense. And he wanted everybody to know what they were doing. He was resentful of fumbles and interceptions and missed assignments and penalties. And his teams were just so sound that they were very difficult to beat.
A kindred spirit to Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler, the three had worked together at Ohio State and shared a similar approach to the game. Yet while Woody and Bo had celebrated careers in the Big Ten Conference, Doyt enjoyed his success in the Mid-American Conference in relative obscurity. But his achievements were no less remarkable. While coaching at Bowling Green State University, Doyt transformed a losing program into a consistent winner. In 10 years, his teams won 5 conference championships, as well as a small college national championship in 1959. They never lost more than 2 games in a season. And when he retired in 1964, his .855 career winning percentage was the best in the nation. But in truth, Doyt just didn't seem like a football coach. He used phrases like, "Jiminy Christmas," and "boys, oh boys," while shyly kicking the ground. In conversation, he tended to avoid eye contact and often stared out into space. And at first glance, his presence was simple and unassuming.
He would have been the last one I would have picked as the head football coach at Bowling Green State University, because he just didn't look like a football coach. He looked like my next-door neighbor's father.
My first impression was, this guy can't be a successful football coach just to look at him. When you see Doyt, he was unimpressive when you saw him, but when he got on the football field, he was an entirely different personality.
On the field, Doyt Perry was every bit a coach and a consummate educator, for Doyt believed that coaching was teaching at its best, and a football field was the perfect classroom, a place where lessons were learned and applied. But Doyt's classroom wasn't for the faint of heart. His was a school of hard knocks, where cause and effect were taught with a well-placed block or a bone-jarring tackle.
Here's the paradox in the man. I mean, kind, gentle guy. On the practice field, you know, very seldom ever raised his voice, very seldom ever used profanity, very seldom ever got upset. But the thing he understood about football, it was a game of knock 'em. It was a game of sock 'em. It was a physical game. And Bowling Green football team played the physical game. I mean, they got after you.
A Doyt Perry team played hard and played to win each and every game. They were well prepared and physically ready, but rarely overconfident.
He would always go, "Oh man, I don't know if we're going to shape up. I don't know if we can play these guys. They're big and strong, and you know, we're kind of little and slow." And you know, and he'd have that gleam in his eye, and he just had a way to pump you up.
Gosh, he said, you know, I've really, really made a big mistake, and I'm so sorry about this. You know, I should have never scheduled this team for us to play. I mean, they're just bigger than we are, and they're, you know, stronger than we are, and they're faster than we are. It's not your fault, guys. You know, it's all my fault. I should have known better. I should not have scheduled this team. It's really a disservice to you guys for me to have done that.
Doyt, in fact, would tell us we were going to lose in a lot of cases. He'd say, you know, you can't beat this guy. You can't handle this. This guy's too good for you. And you see what he's doing. And it worked.
When Doyt worried out loud, his players knew that he was issuing them a challenge, a reminder that victories weren't given, they were earned. It was the essence of Doyt's coaching psychology, encouraging players to motivate themselves.
Sometimes it was just a couple of words. Hey, do better. I mean, sometimes that's all Doyt would say, hey, do better. Or I can still remember him stopping practice. I'm sure that all the other guys who've ever played for him can tell you this, stopping practice in the middle of practice and walking up to a player and looking at him very, just for a few seconds and then looking away and saying, do you like football? And of course, what are you going to say to Doyt? Well, I don't like football. You're going to tell Doyt I don't like football? No.
But still, afterwards you'd think, why did he ask me that question? And there was a reason for it, because maybe you messed up in the classroom, maybe you weren't working out as hard as you could, maybe you missed an assignment, or maybe he just wanted to know, are you thinking football? I think it was his way of getting you to think football. That, hey, do I really like football? Am I committed? Am I prepared to make the sacrifices that this program and Doyt Perry require?
At Bowling Green, liking football meant more than enjoying the sport. It also meant meeting your responsibilities to the team, and winning teams came from coaches who taught with respect and players who learned with desire. Because to Doyt, values were always a part of the game.
Loyalty, dedication to what's right, high integrity, compassion, the competitiveness that he demonstrated without a negative side to it, a positive competitiveness, wanted to win but not win at all costs.
He said things that we believed. In my association with Coach Perry, I found what he said that he usually did, and it was usually that way. There was no big promises of any glitter or glamour, these type of things. It was just honest conversation.
Doyt treated the players fairly. He treated them honestly. He treated them with a great amount of respect and a great amount of dignity. People will do about anything for you as long as you respect them and give them their dignity as a human being. When you lose that, you're in trouble. And Doyt had that.
Doyt Perry was a winner all his life, and he made those around him winners too. But the coaching records are incomplete because they don't show the number of lives he influenced, the hopes he encouraged, or the friendships that grew stronger with time. The story of Doyt Perry is all these things. It is a story of inspired leadership, of a coach who never wanted to be anything else, and of players who took away more than championships from the playing field. And it reminds us how, in a perfect world, things would always be in college football.
During the time that he coached, in my judgment, that was the absolute ideal college football setting. A great, caring coach and players that were not ballyhooed, but played together as a team, that once they had finished their careers realized what a great experience it was to play for this man, to go to this school and to play on these championship teams. That's the absolute ideal situation. And the man that created it was Doyt Perry.
Like all good coaches, Doyt was first a student of the game. He began his career at Bowling Green in 1929 as a three-sport athlete, playing forward in basketball, shortstop in baseball, and quarterback in football. In those days, the school competed against other small colleges in Ohio, like Ashland, Bluffton, and Defiance. It was the time of the single wing, the drop kick, and bands that marched, one letter at a time. With Doyt calling the plays, the football team went undefeated for 18 straight games. The streak included 6 ties, 5 of which were scoreless. But one thing was clear, Doyt was a tough man to beat. After graduating with a degree in secondary education, Doyt went to work at Lorain Clearview High School west of Cleveland. Lorain was a blue-collar town, full of steel mills and tough kids. Clearview didn't have a football team, so Doyt's first coaching duties were to oversee basketball and track. His career as a football coach began, oddly enough, with a rejection letter. Doyt received the letter after interviewing with another school system in 1935. It read,
"The board liked you to a man. Your credentials are top-notchers. Undoubtedly, it was your deficiency in football coaching which prevented you from rating even higher here. Better luck next time, old boy. You'll get someplace. There's no doubt about that."
Undeterred, Doyt found another way into football. He started his own team at Clearview from scratch. Some of his players had never seen a football game, but what they lacked in experience, Doyt made up for in perseverance. His team won the very first game it played and went on to capture 4 league titles in 6 years. But Doyt was a winner at every sport he tried. His track squad earned 7 county titles, while his basketball team made the playoffs almost every year. Along the way, Doyt was also a popular teacher and student advisor, and if that weren't enough, served as the school's principal for 2 years as well. These experiences helped Doyt appreciate how everyday life affected his student athletes, and he came to realize that the best coaching was often required away from the playing field. In 1943, Doyt moved to Upper Arlington, an affluent suburb of Columbus. The town was different, but the results were the same. His team went undefeated 3 times and collected 4 league titles. Only a 3-year stint in the Navy kept him from winning more. Doyt's success had made him well known in the Columbus area. In 1951, this notoriety brought him to the attention of Woody Hayes. Newly arrived at Ohio State, Woody was busy assembling his first staff. Bo Schembechler, then a graduate assistant at Ohio State, remembers that Doyt quickly became a valued member.
That was a new staff that Woody put together. There were some veteran guys and there were some new people coming in. It wasn't 6 months before you could tell the #1 assistant that Woody counted on was Doyt Perry. And he was right, because this is a guy who had an insight into football, into people. He was just good.
Feisty and intense, Woody was totally committed to his job and expected the same from his assistants. Doyt would say later that Woody was the hardest worker he had ever seen, and that he was nothing but football. Doyt, who was older than Woody, was in contrast calm and easygoing, but he appreciated Woody's dedication and his conservative game plan. And with both men equally intolerant of mistakes, the two got along better than most.
He always treated Doyt with great respect. I don't think there were a lot of confrontations between Doyt and Woody, and there usually is between Woody and staff members, and because I had plenty of those myself.
At Ohio State, Doyt saw firsthand what hard work could achieve. The Buckeyes went undefeated in 1954, giving Woody his first national championship. All that season, his team simply ran over and through the opposition. Their attack featured halfback Howard Hopalong Cassidy, a 2-time All-American and future Heisman Trophy winner. Cassidy was a tough, determined back and a threat to score from either side of the ball. As backfield coach, Doyt was credited by Woody as one of the masterminds behind Ohio State's powerful offense. By comparison, Bowling Green's football program was struggling in 1954. After playing as an independent for years, the school had joined the more competitive Mid-American Conference in 1952. The MAC was dominated by Miami University, shown here in red against Bowling Green. Miami had a strong football tradition and a reputation for developing great coaches, and unlike Bowling Green, had actively recruited players for years. University President Ralph McDonald knew that success in football could help promote the university and enhance campus life. A perfectionist, McDonald wanted the best for Bowling Green, and Ohio State had the best. It had Doyt Perry. After the season, Doyt was asked to consider returning to his alma mater. His choices seemed clear-cut. The Buckeyes were the best team in the nation's top football conference. The Falcons were the last-place team in what was then a second division conference. In Columbus, Saturdays were spent before 75,000 loyal fans. In Bowling Green, the stadium only had 6,500 seats, many of which went empty on game days. But there was one difference, which made all the difference. In Bowling Green, the team could be Doyt Perry's team, the ideal situation. In March of '55, Doyt accepted President McDonald's offer. Back in Columbus, Woody lamented publicly that he had lost the finest friend and best coach he had ever worked with. In Bowling Green, things began to change.
Stand hut! Now drive your feet! Feet! That's better.
We were a little worried about the type of program that we were going to enter. If he was going to be a very hard coach to be under in terms of long drills and practices and victory at all costs, because he came from Ohio State, which, victory is very important.
It's the first time I'd seen Doyt, and he said, "Hey, you off the courts. This is reserved for our quarterbacks. We're going to work out." I said, "Coach, I am one of the quarterbacks." He looked at me, shook his head, turned around and walked away. I said, "Oh, brother." But that's the first time I saw Doyt Perry.
He wouldn't build the players in terms of saying, we got great talent here, you can do it. He just simply said, we're going to be okay this year, we're going to get better every year, and it was amazing how some of those players developed into great players that were already on this campus.
When Doyt returned to Bowling Green, he was 45 years old. He'd been a high school teacher and coach for 16 years and an assistant to Ohio State for another 4. He knew better than to try and be another Woody Hayes. He would simply be Doyt, and that meant fair play and straight talk.
He didn't mollycoddle anybody. He told them where they stood. He told them what they needed to do to improve. If they didn't improve, they weren't going to play. They knew that, and they knew it has nothing personal. They knew that Doyt was going to play the best people he could. There would be no favorites.
Doyt had the ability to tell a person or player things that the player didn't want to hear. And later on you find that that's a hard thing to do, is to tell somebody that they're not measuring up, they're not doing what they're supposed to. But Doyt had a way of doing that.
Doyt wanted his new players to think and act like winners. Physical readiness was important, but his team would also be prepared mentally and emotionally as well. With this in mind, Doyt took extra care in selecting his assistant coaches. He wanted a staff that would lead by example as well as by words. And for that, solid values and winning attitudes were more important than technical skills.
I'd had quite a lot of success as a basketball coach, and I suppose Doyt just thought that I was a coach. And I told Doyt, I said, Doyt, football in my background doesn't run very deep. I'm primarily trained as a basketball coach. And he said, I pick my coaches for the qualities that I think that make good coaching. He says, we will teach you what we want you to teach the players.
Doyt had a good saying, and I've heard him say it many times, that you win with character, not characters. Doyt was very well organized. He had a coach's directive, and it was just pertaining to the behavior and the expectations of his coaching staff, and it was like 2 pages long. And these were all things that he expected from his coaches. Loyalty, emphasis on academics, being close to your kids, invite your kids to your homes, get them to know your families, You treated that kid like he was your own son, I guess, and he wanted them to be treated with high respect and high regard, and that's what we did.
The relationship between coaches and players was central to Doyt's coaching philosophy, and he defined this relationship through a set of guiding principles. The principles spoke of responsibility, commitment, and sacrifice. They defined who he was as a coach and what his team should be. These were Doyt's rules he would passionately share with his players each year.
He gets so excited. He started with a suit coat on and a tie and all dressed up. And as he went on and got more excited, he would take his coat off, and then it was tie. And finally he ended up in his undershirt, and he didn't even realize it. And he started to put his shirt back on, put it on backwards. That's the sort of thing that kind of got us all excited about playing for Doyt Perry.
You truly lived by the principles that he wanted the game to be played. His staff understood it, the players understood it, and if you violated the principles, you didn't play. You went down to the bottom of the list.
By the start of the '55 season, Bowling Green was a new team. Playing with a newfound confidence, the Falcons won 6 of its first 7 games.
There wasn't a game that we went in that we didn't think we couldn't win. I mean, we just had confidence, and as the season went on and we won a few games, our confidence built, and we were tough opponents.
For the year, Doyt's offense would score 4 times as many points as their opponents, while his defense tallied 5 shutouts, as many as the last 4 seasons combined. They weren't doing anything fancy. They were just playing good football.
We threw the ball effectively, but not frequently. It was based on the ability to control the line of scrimmage and run the ball. Play good, solid defense, hustling defense. But the basic strategy of running the ball and controlling the line of scrimmage and playing defense, and then not making mistakes, that was Doyt Perry's football.
In November, the upstart Falcons squared off against the nationally ranked Miami Redskins in Oxford. The Redskins, led by future Notre Dame coach Ara Parseghian, were the defending MAC champions. Incredibly, a Bowling Green victory would take that championship away. The Falcons, outmanned and playing without their starting quarterback, nearly did the impossible. For most of the game, Bowling Green's defense kept the nation's 4th-ranked offense in check. But late in the first half, the Redskins broke loose for 49 yards from deep in their own territory. A few plays later, Miami went in for the game's only score. With the loss, the Falcons would end the season with a 7-1-1 record, good enough for 2nd place in the conference. Good enough, that is, unless you were Doyt Perry. He was just getting started. The following year, Doyt and the Falcons hit the ground running, literally. Beginning with a 73-0 blowout of Defiance College, the Falcons let loose a relentless ground assault. In just 9 games, the team would rush for almost 3,000 yards and 39 touchdowns. For the 2nd year in a row, Bowling Green and Miami met with the MAC title on the line. And once again, the game was a tough physical contest. The Redskins took a 7-0 advantage into the 3rd quarter when Harold Peak blocked a Miami punt and returned it for a Falcon touchdown. With Chuck Perry converting the extra point, the game ended in a 7-7 tie. The tie was costly for Miami because they had scheduled one less conference game than Bowling Green. When the Falcons defeated Ohio University the following week, the championship was theirs and theirs alone. For his team's stunning revival, Doyt would be named Ohio College Football Coach of the Year. But on that sunny fall day, he celebrated what mattered to him most, a team victory and a conference championship. That was what the game was all about. That was Doyt Perry football. When it was over, Doyt was offered another kind of reward. The University of Missouri gave him the chance to go to a major college program as head coach.
He called me. I was coaching at Northwestern with Parsegan. He called me and asked me if I would go to Missouri with him. And I said, Doyt, don't base it on me. I said, but you should go. I said, that's a great opportunity. Missouri is a great opportunity.
The rumor was starting to spread around the campus that Coach Perry was leaving. And this was big news and bad news. Winning the championship all of a sudden became a cloud over all of the players because we were afraid the guy that made us go was going to walk out on us.
A typical coach would have jumped at the chance to further his career, but Doyt was anything but typical.
He wasn't thinking about future jobs. Doyt just wasn't like that. I don't think Doyt ever applied for a job. I think he hated to leave. It was still a challenge at Bowling Green. We hated to uproot our family, and I think Doyt was so happy to be at his alma mater. He enjoyed the university and the people in the community and decided that was it.
I was out on the road scouting. We played Ohio University our first year. We weren't supposed to win. And I listened, of course, when I was traveling, I would listen to the radio to get the scores and what have you. And lo and behold, we went down and we beat Ohio U. And I came back and I came into the building about 8 o'clock at night, that Saturday night after we'd beaten Ohio U. And Doyt was standing in the hallway looking there. It looked like he'd lost his last friend. And here we just won a very important football game that nobody expected us to win. And I looked at Doyt and I said, Doyt, I said, what's the matter? I said, we won, didn't we? And he said, yes, but he says, we looked terrible in doing it.
To most coaches, winning was enough. But Doyt wanted something more from his players. He wanted perfection, and perfection was not making mistakes, period. Turnovers and penalties weren't statistics. They were the difference between good teams and great ones. Stopping mistakes was Doyt's great obsession throughout his career. Even so, he couldn't always prevent his team from beating itself. In 1957, the Falcons committed more fumbles and penalties than their opponents. The miscues helped drop the team to a second-place finish with an overall record of 6-1-2. 1958 brought even more frustration. 5 games into the season, the Falcons were undefeated and ranked third nationally among small colleges. But then came a stunning homecoming loss to Kent State. Untimely penalties and turnovers were the difference in the game. Stunned, the team traveled to Miami, still having a chance at the MAC title. But the Redskins hadn't lost to Bowling Green in 16 years and were the odds-on favorite to win the conference. Nevertheless, Doyt's squad went to the locker room at halftime, leading 14-0. In the excitement, Doyt said something he would regret.
We went in at halftime, and Doyt said, this will be the greatest victory we've ever had at Bowling Green, because they were the team to beat. Some of us probably thought, well, the game's over. Now that we know that this is going to be the greatest victory, we went out in the second half, and they scored 28 points, and we didn't. We made a lot of mistakes in the second half. So at that point, halftime, we lost that momentum. And then he got on the bus and sat behind Bob Zimfer and I, and he goes, I got to tell everybody this. He said, I lost this game for you people. You know, and I thought, wow, you know, here's a guy that says, I lost the game, takes no credit for all the wins, puts it in the paper.
If something didn't go right, he'd always say it was his fault. You know, that sort of thing. Yeah, oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that, or my fault, yeah. He accepted blame for everything that didn't go right, but he made sure it didn't happen again. Usually it was our fault, even though he took the blame for it.
In barely a week's time, the championship was lost. But what wasn't lost on Doyt was a lesson to never take winning for granted. It would be another 2 years before he would lose again.
You would not accept losing. The few times that we lost, I mean, losing was horrible. Winning, of course, is wonderful, but I don't think it's as wondrous as how badly you feel when you lose.
Doyt's idea was that if you didn't win, the problem was not that you weren't good enough, the problem was that he didn't work hard enough, that he didn't prepare you well enough, or you didn't work hard enough. And next week, he took care of that. I'm sure he worked harder, and I know that he saw to it that you worked harder.
After the disappointment of the previous 2 seasons, the 1959 squad gathered amidst lowered expectations. But this group was the first to be completely recruited by Doyt and his staff, and they arrived ready for battle.
Doyt Perry was a general. He was in charge, and these assistants were sergeants, captains, or something under him, and then you got down to us, and we're the field people. We went out and did the job.
As the team prepared, Doyt's rules were firmly enforced. If a player didn't contribute, he would find someone who would. And if a player made mistakes, he would find someone who wouldn't.
You had a running back that fumbled. This guy could run like the wind. This guy is a talented man, Doyt would say. He's a very, very talented man, and there's a place on the field that he should be. It's right next to me on the sidelines. He's a fumbler, and we don't want to put him into the ball game. So you understood that if you made mistakes, if you threw interceptions, if you fumbled the ball, if you jumped off sides, if you had missed assignments, there was no place for you on that football field with Doyt Perry.
Benching players was a last resort. Most of the time, Doyt simply reminded offenders that if they made a turnover, they hurt the team. And if they were penalized, the team was penalized. It was a warning for all. Victories didn't go to the best players. They went to those who played best. And any game could be won or lost.
He says, you know, we just might get our tails kicked today. But you know what? We just might kick their tails. Or this could be nip and tuck. So where does that leave you? I mean, that was probably typical of Doyt's pregame. You're either going to go out there and kick somebody's butt, get your butt kicked, or it's going to be close.
I'd be in a locker room and I'd say, well, what is he saying that for? Well, but when those kids went out on the field, they were ready to play. And so whatever he was saying was right for these players.
Fiery locker room speeches were like fool's gold to Doyt, because teams that relied on emotional highs were doomed to suffer the lows as well. And excited players were quicker to forget their assignments. Doyt preferred more subtle inspiration, making comments that lingered in his players' minds, inciting a state of readiness from within.
He had a unique way of making you scared and making you want to give everything you had for him. He had an unusual personality.
He had a way of, I don't care if that team was 0-8, he would make you believe that they could beat you. And so that when you went back out on a practice field, you worked your butt off to prepare for that team.
My belief is that Doyt Perry was the greatest psychologist that ever was. No question about it. I'm not saying that he was the greatest football coach that ever was, but he was the greatest psychologist that ever was, and that's how he won football games.
During practice, Doyt could be the master of understatement, impressing his players with what he'd say or wouldn't say.
He could motivate people sometimes merely by just looking at them and looking away. I mean, sometimes he didn't have to say anything to you. You just knew that he wasn't happy with what you were doing.
Doyt never hollered. He wasn't one of those hollering coaches, but he had a way with words, boy. He could beat you good with words and not really raise his voice. He was unique that way.
Doyt would have
a one-liner that he would come up with, and he would zig you, and next thing you know, he's tweaked something inside that got your mind going and your heart going and your soul and your spirit, and unleashed this resolve.
The '59 Falcons were perfectly tailored for Doyt's motivational style. As a whole, they seemed less prone to extreme highs and lows, and from the start, they played together with precision and consistency.
It was a season that you just saw a team get better and better as it went on. It just seemed like everything came together. We had good chemistry as far as players. Everybody just seemed to come through. We had some young players that stepped forward and contributed.
By the time they faced Miami in their 6th game, the Falcons were undefeated and looking for redemption. With Bernie Casey scoring 3 touchdowns, Bowling Green handed the Redskins their worst defeat ever in MAC competition, 33-16. 2 weeks later, Bowling Green hosted the University of Delaware in what was called the Dream Game. The Blue Hens came in as the #1 small college team in the nation, while the Falcons were ranked 3rd. As luck would have it, the game had been on the schedule for some time. For Delaware, it was bad luck. Bowling Green scored first and often as they soundly beat the Blue Hens 30-8. The rout was highlighted by Jack Harbaugh's 3 interceptions and Chuck Comer's 90-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. The win vaulted the Falcons to the #1 ranking. In the season finale, Bowling Green overcame a 9-point halftime deficit to beat a stubborn Ohio University team. The deciding score came early in the 4th quarter when Jerry Coloner returned an interception 50 yards for a touchdown. As a result, Bowling Green had its 2nd MAC championship and its first perfect undefeated season. For his part, Doyt was honored again as Ohio College Football Coach of the Year, but the crowning achievement came when the Falcons were awarded the 1959 Small College Championship. Finally, there was no mistaking perfection. The start of a new decade found Bowling Green with something even more elusive than a national championship. It now had the makings of a winning tradition. New players arrived on campus expecting to compete for championships, but they would leave knowing more about life as well, because Doyt believed that winning was worthless if his players weren't better for the experience. And any lesson worth learning on the field was worth living off it.
Doyt wanted to win maybe more than any person that I ever knew, but he never wanted to win unless the game was fair, hard played, and you were prepared for it.
We learned not to get too up and not to get too down. You're able to, it gave me the ability to deal with adversity, really in the workplace, and because you're competing with other individuals there, and we competed here.
The inspiration, how to inspire a ball player, how to be concerned about the individual, totally, not only in terms of playing ability, but also academic-wise, and his ability to get along as a person in life also.
The effort was the big thing. In other words, I may not know enough to do everything I needed to do, or perhaps there may very well be others that are cut out to do it better. But if I made a consistent effort and I stayed at that and I was persistent about what I believed in and was focused on what I was attempting to accomplish, I would get there.
What you could see later on is that Doyt went after people that had character, that had the potential physically, but were strong at heart. They were strong in their minds. They were pure in terms of their attitude towards life.
In 1960, the Falcons made another run at an undefeated season, but their win streak was finally stopped at 18 games by Ohio University. As a result, Ohio finished first in the national polls, while Bowling Green came in second. For the next 4 years, the two schools fought for conference supremacy. In 1961 and 62, the Falcons held the advantage, beating Ohio twice by identical scores of 7-6. In both games, a missed extra point allowed Bowling Green to win the conference. But Ohio returned the favor the following season, shutting out the Falcons to reclaim the title. Of his later teams, Doyt was perhaps proudest of this 1963 squad. Although they didn't win a championship, the players showed the kind of tenacity that Doyt loved. Several times that season, the Falcons rallied for come-from-behind victories. The most memorable of these came mid-season against the University of Toledo. The game was an example of Doyt's worst fears coming true. A clearly overmatched Toledo team dominated Bowling Green in the first half, breaking out to a 20-0 lead. At halftime, the players rallied to their coach, looking for any encouragement. But what they got was some unexpected advice.
Men, we got to go out there in the second half. I know we're probably going to lose, but I want you to lose like gentlemen. I don't want any fighting. I don't want any personal fouls. If we're going to lose like gentlemen. And that was it.
Faced with admitting defeat, his team went out and staged a furious comeback in the second half. And with time running out, quarterback Jerry Ward connected with Jim Goings, streaking down the sideline. The result was a 37-yard touchdown pass to win the game. Doyt's worst fears had turned into the best kind of victory, a team victory.
Guys were really fighting hard out there, and I observed that a lot of times during the time I played here at Bowling Green was average ball players, when the game time came, they were performing over and above their level, probably of their ability.
The 1964 Falcons finished with a 9-1 record to capture their third MAC championship in 4 years. For Doyt, it was his last championship. After the season, he stepped down as head coach to become Bowling Green's athletic director.
He was a fairly conservative coach. He wanted to avoid making mistakes. In a situation like this, it's like being in the fourth quarter. I mean, he realized his career wasn't going to last too much longer. He said, gee, it's like being ahead 7 points near the end of the game. It's time to button down and eliminate the possibility of mistakes. So I think it's something that was very much in character.
His greatest pride, in addition to his own family, was this extended family, was to see all of the young people, whether it was at Clearview or Upper Arlington or Ohio State or Bowling Green, that how he affected their lives, and then to see those young people develop with their own families and have success in their own careers.
In the years after his retirement from coaching, Doyt continued to follow the lives and careers of his former players. And they knew that they could always go to him for guidance.
You'd always look to him for advice. You'd go back to him. I think that's probably the greatest measure of a coach, when your players come back to you, which everyone did.
He always would pull us aside, one-on-one, sometime during whatever was going on. And he would just talk to us. He wanted to know how we were doing, how our families were doing. Those were the great times with Doyt, when he would pull you off one-on-one, and he truly wanted to know how we were doing. He thrived on that. He thrived on seeing us succeed.
He was a father image. He was a friend, and I think Doyt went out of his way to make sure that you were satisfied as far as trying to tell you the right thing, giving you the right answers, and trying to make you see the right way to go. I think he always did that.
It was a particular source of pride to Doyt that many of his former assistants and players went on to coach at colleges all over the country. And more than a few of these had Doyt to thank for their start in the profession.
And I think Doyt influenced a lot of people to be coaches simply because of the way he treated them, and they kind of wanted to be like Doyt and coach like Doyt, and many of them did.
If Doyt Perry would have told me to go paint cars, I'd still be spray painting. Because whatever he said, I did. And to be honest, I don't know why. I think I do, but I mean, he had such an influence on all of us that he could have probably put us any place he wanted to put us. You believed in the guy so much because you knew he was so honest and he had your best interest at heart.
In December of 1988, a number of Doyt's protégés gathered in New York to witness his induction into the College Football Hall of Fame. Many of his fellow inductees were better known, but few were better loved.
Of all the people that were inducted on that particular weekend, I think Doyt had more friends and followers there than anybody else. And he wanted everybody there to feel like they too had a piece of that. And I think that's the way Doyt was. He wouldn't accept that just for Doyt Perry.
It was a black tie affair, and everyone was so attired. And Doyt got up in front of us and said, "Oh," he said, "I want you to know how embarrassed I am about this. I really feel," kicking dirt. There wasn't any dirt on the carpet, but that's what he was doing. He said, "I just can't tell you how embarrassed I am that you had to go out and buy these fancy clothes," he said, "to come to this." He said, "I'll probably never get over that."
But the most fun was afterwards when we got together in a suite and renewed old times, and a lot of the players were there again, a lot of his ex-coaches, and it was good just seeing everybody and reminiscing around Doyt. And he was a ball fire even then.
I used to think to myself when Doyt was still alive, you know, what's going to happen when Doyt's gone? You know, and I can't describe how much I love the man and how much he meant to me, and I think about him almost every day.
For 10 years, he was the winningest coach in college football, but in truth, Doyt was a winner all his life.
When you approach the game of life with sincerity, with hard work, with honesty, with all of those things that he personified and he tried to turn loose in you, you automatically win when you approach life like that. And that's the legacy. That's something that transcends life and death and perpetuates itself as long as you have someone to continue stressing and continuing that legacy of what is important.
Every day, every single day. I have a picture of him on my wall in my office, and every day I look up, and when I run into a situation that's tough or a situation that I have some doubts about how I should handle it, I think to myself, how would Doyt handle this? And there's a little voice in me that kind of gives me an answer. And I know what you're thinking. You might be thinking, well, can't happen that way. Well, I'm here to tell you it does happen that way. That's the kind of influence that he's had on my life.
What he stood for is what I certainly strive for as I tried to pursue and be effective as a head football coach. I certainly wanted to be a good influence on the players, and he was. And I wanted players to understand there was life after football, and that certainly was the case with Doyt.
Hey, those qualities are still there. Those things that he taught me, those little tools and lessons that he gave me are still there. I'm using them every day. And I think that you become much more thankful to him for that.
We were always close. And he's meant a lot to me. He really has. And a lot of the things that I believe in coaching, you know, I got from him.
It just became a part of me being a part of Doyt.
Today, a football stadium stands in Bowling Green, and fittingly, the biggest classroom on campus is named for someone who was both coach and teacher, Doyt L. Perry. The stadium is a lasting legacy to the ideals of college football and to a man who held those ideals even higher than the game itself. It is a place where people gather each year to see what hope and hard work can achieve. But Doyt's real legacy will always be in the players who take the field, in every effort they make, and in every victory they share. And most of all, his legacy lives on in the people who knew him best.
To me, he was the most natural. What you saw is what you got. And over the years, he never changed. I mean, he didn't change with his success. He didn't change with any failures, which he didn't have many of, but he was just a great individual.
Doyt always seemed to have a lot of confidence in me, and he always made me feel confident. And I would say that, you know, it was more than I liked Doyt Perry. I mean, I love Doyt Perry.
Well, anyone who knew my dad or who spoke with my dad on the phone soon found out that when he was through talking and he hung up the phone and he never said goodbye. And I think that as we all talk about my dad and share about my dad, I realize that his spirit never says goodbye either.
I believe he's still coaching today. And there'll be a time that maybe I can make his team again.
As long as there's a heart beating in any of us that were ever associated with that man, Doyt Perry lives. Doyt Perry lives. I swear to God he lives.
This program is made possible by Chuck and Betty Perry, Bill and Sandy Gunlock, David Perry, and the Charles E. Perry Society. Additional support has been provided by the following: